Our speaker today will be Thomas Budzinski from UBC, who will talk on the recurrence of the uniform infinite half-planar map via duality of resistances. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So hello everyone. Thank you very much for being here. So I'm going to talk to you about the simple random walk on some random planar maps, and more precisely on a new proof of the recurrence of a certain model of random planar maps, which is the uniform infinite half-plane map. Okay, so let me first, maybe even if it's probably useless here, remind you of a few definitions on planar maps. So for me, a planar map is going to be a gluing of polygons that is homeomorphic either to the sphere for in the finite case or to the plane in the infinite case. As usual, I'm only going to consider rooted maps, which means that the maps comes with a distinguished oriented edge, which is the red one on this picture. So here is a very quick survey of the theory of random planar maps. A very natural idea for probabilists is to say, let's consider some class of planar maps, for example, triangulations or quadrangulations or general maps. And among all the maps in this class with a certain fixed size, let's pick one uniformly at random and try to study its property, what it looks like, and everything. So it's a field that has been very active in the last 15 years. And one of the motivation comes from the work of theoretical physicists in the 80s. These physicists wanted to build models for two-dimensional quantum gravity. So basically, gravity means there is some geometry, quantum means random, and the four-dimensional space-time is too hard to handle. So let's start with 2 dimensions. So one of the ways to study maps of large size is to try to build limiting objects when the size goes to infinity, limiting random objects. There are two main ways to do so. One is to rescale distances and study scaling limits, which is something that I'm not going to talk about at all today. And the other one is to build infinite but discrete objects. And for this, the most usual way to go is to consider local convergence. So we say that there is a natural topology on finite or infinite maps where two maps are close to each other if they have large isomorphic balls around the root. So if the neighborhood of the root looks the same on those two maps. So it means that if we have a finite planar map, so a map homeomorphic to the sphere, if it's very large, when we sit at the root and look at the neighborhood, we don't see anymore that we are on the sphere, and what we see looks like a plane. So it makes sense that we have convergence to infinite objects, which are infinite maps covering the whole plane. So many such objects have been introduced and studied. The first one was the UIPT by Angel and Schramm in 2003, which is the local limit as the size goes to infinity of uniform triangulations, of the sphere. And since then, many similar models have been introduced. So 2 of them will be of interest for us today. One is UIPQ for quadrangulations, so maps where we have a constraint that all the faces must have degree exactly 4, and the UIPM, which is the version for general planar maps when we don't put any constraint on the degrees of the faces. So a lot of the focus has been on studying metric properties of these random maps. For example, it's been very early understood that the volume growth with of order r to the 4, so the ball of radius r in one of these limiting objects contains of order r to the 4 vertices, and much finer metric properties are now very well understood. For example, we know that if we rescale the distances, so if we decide that the length of the edges is epsilon and let epsilon go to 0, there is a scaling limit, which is the Boolean plane, which has links with other random geometric objects, such as Liouville quantum gravity. So from the metric point of view, everything is now pretty well understood for these models. On the other hand, it's been much more difficult to understand spectral properties of these objects, by which I mean properties of the simple random walk on these models. So I'm taking one of these uniform infinite models, which are limits of uniform finite planar map models. I'm starting a vertex from the root, and I'm starting from the root, and I'm doing a simple random walk on my infinite map. So the most natural question, which has been opened during 10 years before being solved, was whether this simple random walk was recurrent or not. So it was proved by Gourel, Gourevich, and Narmias that not only for the UIPT or the UIPQ, but for a wide class of models, the simple random walk is actually recurrent. So it's the arguments of Gourel, Gourevich, and Narmias rely on circle packings, which is a very nice and fascinating theory, but that I'm not going to discuss today. It's a very robust argument. Basically, all that it requires is that the model is a limit of uniformly rooted finite models. So on each finite model, the root edge is chosen uniformly at random, and that the degrees of the vertices have exponential tail. There has also been a different proof of the same result by James Lee several years later. Another very natural question is what the speed of the simple random walk is. So it's a problem that was settled by Ewan and Tom Hutchcroft a few years ago. The distance between the root and the position of the simple random walk at time n is of order n to the 1/4 up to subpolynomial corrections. Okay, so in particular, we have this subdiffusive behavior that the simple random walk is moving in a very slow way compared, for example, to regular lattices such as ZD. A related question that will be of particular interest for me today is the estimation of resistances between the root and... Sorry, someone is not mute.
What?
So, someone is not mute. I'm hearing some people.
I'm not sure that's a question.
Okay, thank you. All right. So a related question is to try to estimate the electric resistance between, on the one hand, the root, and on the other hand, the boundary of some large ball, let's say of radius r. So what do previous works say about this? Okay, so it was proved by Gwyn and Miller that these resistances are polylogarithmic in the radius, so they do not, although we know that this resistance is going to infinity because the simple random walk is recurrent, it's going to infinity quite slowly since it's at most polynomial in log R. But there is still a gap. There is still a gap between upper and lower bounds, since circle packing arguments, such as the one of Gurel-Gurevich and Armias, are only expected to give a lower bound of order log R. So it's not something that that is written in the literature, but it's believed that if we try to do this argument in a more quantitative way, the lower bound on the resistance growth that we get is of order, so log R if the degrees of the vertices are bounded, which was a result by Benyamini and Schramm, and if the degrees of the vertices are unbounded but have exponential tails, it's believed that we only get from these arguments a lower bound of order log R, which is smaller than the right conjectured order of magnitude, which would be log R. So the goal of this talk is going to be to give a new proof of recurrence for a certain planar map model. The argument is not going to be as robust as a circle packing argument, since it's only working for one specific model. But on the other hand, we will obtain a better lower bound on the growth of the resistances. All right. So actually, the model that I'm going to consider is not exactly one of the models that I have described before. It's a model with the topology of the half plane and not of the full plane. So it's not something. It's a model with a boundary. So it's not something that can be obtained as a local limit of say of spheres. But it's going to be I'm going to be a little bit more precise in a few minutes. But half-plane models are models of infinite maps where we also have an infinite boundary. So you can think of it as having an infinite line, and below it you have nothing, and above it you have some map. And the boundary is going to be simple. So there has also been some work on the recurrence of half-plane maps, more precisely, the recurrence of the uniform infinite half-plane triangulation was proven by Angel and Rai in 2016. Note that it's not something that is covered, for example, by circle packing arguments. And the main reason for this is that these are not stationary models. So these are models where the root is on the boundary. So you are starting from this infinite boundary. And after a lot of time, you're going to be far away from the boundary. So what you see, what the random walker sees after a long time is very different from what it sees in the beginning. So more precisely, the model that I'm going to consider is UIHPM. So it's basically a uniform random model of a half-plane map where we don't put any constraint on the degree of the faces, and I will assume that we have a simple boundary. I will give a precise definition of the model on the next slide. But the theorem that we proved with Thomas Le Hérissi last year is the following. This half-planar map is almost surely recurrent. And more precisely, we can get a better lower bound, even if this model does not have bounded degrees. We can get a better lower bound than with other methods, namely the resistance between the root and the boundary of the ball of radius r is at least logarithmic in R. So it's this is a lower bound that is matching the conjectured order of magnitude of the resistances. So now that I have stated this result, I need to tell you precisely what the model is. So I'm going to give you two different definitions of this UIHPM. The first one will be here to motivate the model and say why this is the natural model for a uniform infinite map in the half plane. And the second will be the one that we will use in practice. So let's start with the first definition. The first definition is, as usual, as a limit of finite models. So more precisely, I'm going to consider a Boltzmann model of random maps with a simple boundary. More precisely, MP is going to be the critical Boltzmann map with simple boundary of length p. So for any possible map, little m with a simple boundary of length p, the probability that MP is equal to this little m is going to be proportional to 1/12 to the power the number of edges of m. So we have a Boltzmann weight 1/12, which is critical since it's the maximal value for which the partition function does not blow up. Okay, and crucially, we root this Boltzmann map on the boundary, which means that when the perimeter goes to infinity, this finite boundary becomes infinite. So the topology of the disk becomes the topology of the half plane, and we get some infinite planar map, M infinity. All right. The second construction will rely on the uniform infinite half plane quadrangulation, which is the analog object, but quadrangulation, so where all the faces must have degree 4. It's an object that was that had been bit before, so in a similar way as the local limit of uniform quadrangulations with a large volume and a large boundary. And to pass from quadrangulations to general maps, we make use of the Tott bijection, which is maybe the oldest bijection for planar maps. So how can we turn a planar quadrangulation to a general map? Let's imagine that we have a quadrangulation. So here I'm starting from a quadrangulation with a boundary, since we have interested in models with a boundary. Note that a planar quadrangulation is always bipartite, so we can color the vertices in white or black, such as any two neighbor vertices have distinct colors. So each face is going to be of the form white, black, black. And to build a general map from this, what we can do is just keep the white vertices, and for each face of the quadrangulation, draw the white diagonal of this face. And if we do this, we obtain a general map for which the vertices are the white vertices of my quadrangulation, and each edge of the general map corresponds to a face of the quadrangulation. Okay, so basically, to obtain the uniform infinite half plane map from the uniform infinite half plane quadrangulation, we need to apply this procedure. But as you can see on this example, there is a boundary issue. Namely, if we start from a quadrangulation with a simple boundary, we do not always get a map with a simple boundary. So if we want a simple boundary, what we need to do is to perform a pruning procedure on this boundary. More precisely, if we run this procedure on the infinite model, so on the UIHPQ, we get then there will be a unique infinite two connected component. So for example, here we have two connected components, this one and this one. In the infinite setting, we will have a unique two connected one. So we keep only this one, which means that we will remove all the little finite two connected components hanging from the boundary. So this is how we build the UIHPM from the uniform infinite half-plane quadrangulation. So I'm not going to detail how to prove that the two definitions of M infinity that I have given are indeed equivalent, since it relies on more or less standard arguments. One thing that we need to note, however, is that these small finite two connected components are not going to matter a lot in estimation of distances or resistances. Basically, it's just adding an additive constant in the beginning and not changing anything ever after. So if we want to prove the recurrence of the simple random walk or resistance estimates on the UIHPM, we can do as if this pruning procedure on the boundary was not necessary, and just work on the map obtained from the Todd bijection, obtained by the Todd bijection from the UIHPQ. All right. So now, before moving on to the core arguments of the proof, I need to tell you. Okay, no, sorry. I'm first going to sketch roughly the proof of this result. So the central idea here is to use the self-duality of the model. Namely, when we are looking at uniform planar maps with no constraint on the phase degrees, we have some self-duality. And in particular, we can find some self-dual block in which we have an estimate on the resistance coming from duality arguments. And we get that in this block, with positive probability, the resistance is going to be bounded from below. So we have a certain block where we know that we have some substantial resistance. And then the game will be to use exploration arguments on the UIHPQ. So we know that we have a natural coupling between the infinite quadrangulation and the infinite general map. And by using exploration arguments on the quadrangulation, we can build many copies of these blocks, of this self-dual block, to get a large resistance between the root and infinity. I would like to highlight right now that it's an argument that kind of has a similar flavor as Russo-Seymour-Welch theory in percolation, since it's starting from a duality argument, which gives us some exact computation, and then we are using blocks at different scales to kind of propagate this, which is also the basic idea of many Russo-Seymour-Welch arguments. And this kind of Russo-Seymour-Welch ideas for resistance estimates have already been used in a different context by Biskup, Ding, and Goswami, namely the simple random walk in a random environment given by the exponential of a Gaussian free field. So it's another model. It's another model related to Liouville quantum gravity. All right. So before talking about this central self-duality argument, I need to tell you a little bit more about the UIHPQ. So it's going to be a little bit more convenient to work on the UIHPQ first and then apply this TUT touch bijection to get the general map. So let's see what we can say about the UI-HPQ. A very nice feature of this object is its spatial Markov property. More precisely, if we consider a boundary edge, let's say the one in red here, we can look at the quadrilateral that is above this edge, and it can have several different shapes, which are all represented here. And what is very nice is that first, the probability of each of these cases is known. And second, in each of these cases, we may have finite regions, but these finite regions will be filled with critical Boltzmann quadrangulations, so models that are very well understood. And moreover, what is even nicer is that the infinite part is going to be filled with a quadrangulation that has the same law as the original one. So we have this very nice spatial Markov property that if we have discovered some finite region, then the conditional law of the remaining infinite part has the distribution of Q infinity. So the same distribution as the original. So we can say, let's take a new edge on the new boundary and look what is behind it, and so on. We can iterate this idea. And this is what we call a peeling exploration. So we can explore Q infinity almost face by face, and after n steps, the explored region is going to look like that. So some region of our infinite quadrangulation with a bottom boundary, which is the boundary of the part of the boundary of the original map of the original quadrangulation that is covered by the explored region, and a top boundary, just as on the picture. We can define the notion of boundary length variation on the UI-HPQ, xn, which is the difference between the top boundary and the bottom boundary. And by this spatial Markov property, this is actually a random walk with explicitly known transitions. In particular, we know that the scaling limit of this random walk is a stable Levy process with index 3½ and only negative jumps. So the negative jumps will occur when something like that happens. So the face that we are discovering swallows a large region and separates a large region from infinity. And a very nice feature of these peeling explorations is that at each step, we are allowed to choose however we want the next boundary edge to explore, maybe even depending on what has happened before. So this is what we call a peeling algorithm, a way to choose the next edge, the next boundary edge to explore, given what we have already discovered. All right. So these peeling explorations will be useful a little bit later. But now I'm going to move on to maybe the core argument of the proof, which is duality of resistances. So I'm first going to state a quite classical lemma about duality of resistances in planar maps, and then explain how we apply it there. So imagine that we have a planar map M, say the one in red on the picture, with two vertices, A1 and A3 on the unbounded face. Okay, so we have an unbounded face. We have two vertices, A1 and A3 on it. We can imagine that we have two half lines starting from A1 and A3 and splitting the unbounded face in two. And then we can draw in green the dual map of M star. And if we have these two half lines separating the unbounded face in two, we will also have two particular vertices in the dual map that I'm calling A2 star and A4 star. And this classical lemma on the duality of resistances is that the resistance in the dual between A2 star and A4 star, so in the green map, is equal to the inverse of the resistance in the red map between A1 and A3. All right, so what do we do with this classical lemma? Now, let's imagine that we have a critical Boltzmann quadrangulation of the two picos. Okay, so let's say the one, so here in black on the left of the picture, we have a quadrangulation with both black and white vertices. So by critical Boltzmann, we mean that we have a Boltzmann weight 1/12 on the faces of the quadrangulation. And now let's imagine that the boundary of my Boltzmann quadrangulation is split into four parts. So A1 at the top, A2 star at the bottom, on the left, A3 at the bottom, and A4 star on the right. I'm going to denote by MP the map obtained from my quadrangulation by the third bit bijection on white vertices. So this is the map in red on the picture. And similarly, I'm going to denote by MP star the map obtained by the third bijection on black vertices. So if I'm drawing only black diagonals. All right, so this is the picture, and what we can see on the left is that the green map is actually the dual of the red map. Since each green edge is in one of the faces, so it's crossing exactly one red edge. In particular, if I'm merging the white vertices at the top and the bottom to get A1 and A3, and I'm merging the black vertices on the left and on the right to get A2 star and A4 star, then I am exactly in the setting of the previous lemma, which means that the resistance in my map between A1 and A3, so between the top and the bottom, is equal to the inverse of the dual resistance, so in the green map, between the left and the right. Okay, so that's one equality between a primal and a dual resistance. But on the other hand, imagine, for example, that A1, A2, A3, and A4 all have the same length. Then I have some rotational invariance in distribution. The black and the white vertices are playing the same role in my quadrangulation, which means that these two resistances, so from A1 to A3 and from A2 star and from A2 star to A4 star, these two resistances will have the same distribution. More generally, if I assume that the top and the bottom are small and the left and right are large, so the length of A1 and A3 is larger than the length of A2 and A4, then the resistance between the top and the bottom will dominate stochastically the dual resistance between the left and the right. In particular, this proves that the primal resistance between A1 and A3 stochastically dominates its inverse, which means that, in particular, its probability to be at least 1 is greater or equal to 1/2. Okay, one of the two resistances must have probability 1/2 to be at least 1, since 1 is the inverse of the other. And since the first one dominates the second, it's actually the first one. All right, so we have this self-dual block, and the idea then will be to perform peeling explorations on the UIHPQ and try to find Boltzmann self-dual blocks such as this one. So yeah, Boltzmann blocks like this one, such that when we apply the third bijection to these blocks, we are in position to apply this result and find a resistance that is at least 1 with positive probability. And we want to do that on many scales to build a logarithmic number of blocks. So let's go into this construction with a little bit more details. So first, I'm going to explain how to build one such block at a given scale. So imagine that I have fixed some segment of length L on the boundary of my infinite quadrangulation. And in order to be in position to apply this result, I would like to find a Boltzmann block with a small bottom and top boundary, which separates my red segment from infinity, but a large left and right boundaries. Okay, so I would like, say, the top and bottom boundaries. So what I'm calling the bottom boundary is my original red segment of length L. What I'm calling the left and right boundaries are the parts on the left and right of this bottom boundary. And what I'm calling the top boundary is the boundary of my block, which is not on the boundary of the half plane. So I want the top and bottom to be, say, larger than L, or at least L, and the left and right to be at most L, to be in position. Sorry, it's the opposite. I want the top and bottom to be at least L, and the left and right to be at most L, to be in position to apply this result. All right, so I'm going to do the following things. I'm going to explore my quadrangulation with the following peeling algorithm. At each step, I'm going to pick the edge which is on the left of my red segment at distance 2L along the boundary. And I'm going to stop the exploration as soon as the boundary length process makes a large negative jump, with magnitude larger than L, which means that the exploration process is swallowing a region with perimeter larger than L. So here is what it looks like at some fixed time. I'm doing my exploration on the left of the red segment at distance 2L along the boundary. So here the blue part is the part that I have already explored. And this blue edge is the next edge that I'm going to peel. So the next edge for which I'm going to explore what is above it. And as you can see, it's at distance 2L along the boundary from my red segment. Note that at each time, if my exploration is hitting a point which is a distance less than L from the red part, then it means that I have swallowed more than L on the boundary, so my exploration is stopped. In particular, if my exploration has not been stopped yet, I have at least a boundary length L between the red segment and my blue explored region. So now let's look at what happens at time tau. So this tau is the first time where I'm swallowing a region of perimeter larger than L. Imagine that my jump is actually larger than 4L. Okay, so then I'm swallowing, and that the green region that is swallowed is on the right of the explored edge. Then if I'm swallowing 4 L edges, so I'm swallowing the 2 L edges here, the L edges of the red segment, and at least L edges on its right. So I know that this green hole will be filled by a Boltzmann quadrangulation. So it seems that we are in the right position to find this self-dual block. And moreover, we know that we have a boundary length at least L both on the left and on the right of the red segment. And since this is 2L, the boundary length between the red and the blue regions is at most L. So we are precisely in the right position. We have a top and bottom boundary which are at most L, and the left and right boundaries which are at least L. Sorry. All right. So if this event occurs, then we are in position to apply this self-duality lemma. But on the other hand, the boundary length process is very well understood since it's a simple random walk which scales to to a nice Levy process, to a nice 3-half stable Levy process. In particular, the probability that this first jump smaller than -L is actually smaller than -4L is converging when L goes to infinity to some positive constant delta. So it's something that happens with positive probability. If this happens, then with probability 1/2, the swallowed region is going to be on the right of the export edge, which means that I will have this green block with the right dimensions. And the idea then will be to say, okay, thanks to this spatial Markov property, I know that the unexplored region has the same distribution as Q infinity. So I can do the exact same thing on the unexplored region with this L prime playing the role of a new L. So this here, this new boundary will be my new red segment, and I'm going to do the same thing at a larger scale right above. By controlling this boundary length process, we can argue that L prime is of the same order of magnitude as L. More precisely, the expected ratio between both is bounded, so we can iterate this construction in the unexplored region and so on. Okay, so now how does the end of the proof goes now that we have all the tools? We repeat this construction n times starting from L0 equal to 1. So here will be our first scale. As you can see, this scale is not successful. We did not make a large enough jump to cover the root. So this scale is failed, but we are still able to control the boundary length L1. Now we do the same thing at a new scale. So we try to find a block separating this segment of length L1 from infinity. This time, the exploration is a success. We have a large green Boltzmann block with a new boundary of a new segment of length L2. Now we try to do to find a new block above this new segment. This time the jump is not large enough, so this scale is a failure again, and so on. So here we succeed, and so on. So at each scale, conditionally on everything that has happened before, we have a positive probability to get a green block with nice dimensions. And in this case, by my self-duality lemma, we have a probability 1/2 to have resistance at least 1 between the bottom and the top of the green block. So at each scale, we have a positive probability to have a resistance at least 1, which means that the resistance between the root and the nth blue region will be proportional to the number of scales. And finally, since we are able to control how ln is growing, which is at most exponentially, we can fit a logarithmic number of scales in the ball of radius r, which proves that the resistance is of order at least log r. All right, so these were the main ideas of the proof. Let me finish with some perspectives. So first, unfortunately, it seems hopeless to try to generalize this approach to wider and more universal classes of maps, such as triangulations, because self-duality plays a crucial role. Another natural question will be, can we do something in the full plane topology? So in the full plane topology, there is no way to separate the root from infinity with one single peeling step. So might need to try to glue several blocks together, and it's not clear how to do something like that. But probably the most interesting question would be to try to find matching lower bounds. So we know that if we take one of these self-dual blocks, it has resistance. I mean, if we have a self-dual block with the right dimensions, we can say that it has resistance smaller than 1 with probability at least a half. But to find an upper bound, sorry, I meant a matching upper bound, sorry. To find an upper bound on the resistance, we need to have an upper bound holding at every scale and not at a positive proportion of the scales. So it seems to be more difficult than the lower bound that we proved. And a natural first step, which I think would already be a nice result, would be to prove that in these self-dual blocks, the resistance is typically of order 1. Because here the resistance might be, say, much smaller than 1 with probability 1/2 and much larger with probability 1/2. So it would be nice to prove some kind of concentration result on the resistance. And finally, it might also be possible to generalize this approach to self-dual models of random maps equipped with some statistical physics models. All right, so I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks for the talk. Are there any questions for the speaker?
So maybe I can ask one question about the generalization of this method to the other models, like non-uniform random parameter map models. And so my impression is that this method can be applied to something like UST decorated models or this FK random parameter map decorated models. But there, one issue is that we don't have a good enough control on the metric. So, and I think your result is about something like the
but here,
resistance of the metric ball, right? And
here the control on the metric is very loose because we only care about the logarithm of the distances. So
yeah, but
if you want to do that,
yeah. So I guess my question is, if I want to do that, what kind of metric property do I need? See, just how loose the metric property do I need?
if you only care about the logarithm, it's not a problem to bound R by R squared, for example.
Okay.
So metric estimates that you need are very loose, and the difficulty is more how do you find these blocks? So that's why. That's why we can only handle this particular model. It's because we have this nice way to cut a region from infinity by only one peeling step.
So,
for example, do you need any relation between the how the boundary length of this metric ball growth and this diameter, like these kind of things?
Well, basically, what we're doing in the end, since we were a bit lazy, is that we are bounding the diameter by the boundary length.
You're just okay. I see. Okay, I see.
In the logarithm, we only lose a constant factor, so it's
okay. And okay, then so at least as a comment, my impression is that so the crucial observable in your approach is this boundary length, right? And in all the models that I mentioned, this like this FK random cluster model, there is this natural boundary length coming from this hamburger cheeseburger bijection, and maybe you can still do some peeling using those kind of like piano curves to create these kind of self-dual blocks. Like for example, if you consider the universal spanning tree, then the tree and the dual tree, they naturally give you some graph, which is self-dual, right? And maybe you can explore that piece by piece or something. And the natural boundary length is controlled by random walk as well. So maybe that's possible.
Yeah, That's possible.
Yeah, so Shin, I think that the issue here is that that for like the uniform planar maps, you can kind of peel from any boundary edge, but for like FK decorator or spanning tree decorator, you can kind of only peel from like the root edge.
Yeah, you don't have the choice of where you can peel next.
It makes it a lot more
I
difficult to build these kind of separating blocks.
Okay, I see. Well, in the continuum, do we have some way of like randomizing the tape for like this gamma not equal to square root of a third? Just in the continuum, say.
I mean, I guess there's like the QLE type thing,
Yeah,
but there's also some difficulties with that because it's no longer
and
Markovian.
right. Okay, so yeah, so my thought is premature, but I still think maybe at least for this UST, there's something one can do. Okay. Anyway, so this is just a comment. Okay, but thank you, Ewan, for the complimentary remark.
Okay. So I guess I'll stop recording now.